Single dad receives unexpected message from a struggling mom revealing incredible true love. Jake sat hunched over the grease-stained workbench at the garage, his fingers deftly maneuvering the wrench as he tightened a bolt on a battered pickup. The smell of gasoline filled his nostrils, grounding him amidst the chaos looming back home. But despite the distraction, the toll of single fatherhood clawed at him, relentless and heavy. At 38, the weight of responsibility felt like an anchor, dragging him deeper into a sea of worry. He could feel the anxiety cutting through his heart each time he thought about what Lily might need, the groceries to fill the fridge, and the mounting bills where the numbers never seemed to align. Every laugh from his spirited 7-year-old daughter was a fleeting moment of solace against the storm raging in his mind. But as her innocent joy echoed, memories of his wife loomed, a ghost haunting the corners of his mind, reminding him of the love that had once lit their home. Jake would do anything to keep that love alive for Lily. Yet even the simplest meal was a struggle now, leaving him feeling inadequate in the face of multiple responsibilities. Scrolling through the community group chat on his phone, a message from Sarah caught his eye. The words were raw and desperate, a plea for help with school supplies for her 3 kids. A heavy punch lodged in his chest. The confusion of emotions surged within him. How could a stranger so easily reflect his own heartache? They were in a world that twisted and tormented parents like them. Yet, even as he felt empathy, dread loomed in the back of his mind. Should he respond? Would his kindness be mistaken for pity? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. After a sleepless night filled with frantic thoughts, Jake found himself typing a response. They exchanged messages that revealed shared burdens, the struggle of parenting alone, the weight of loss, dreams deferred. It was as if the universe had conspired to intersect their paths. But with each conversation, tension coiled tighter in his chest. The connection felt real, but vulnerability was a financial gamble that left him financially bereft and emotionally exposed. Weeks rolled forward, drawing them closer, yet Jake's heart raced with each interaction. Society's judgment loomed like a specter, a fierce antagonist that whispered doubt in his ear. What would people say? Would he be perceived as the man swooping in as the charity? Could there be genuine support without the stain of stigma? Jake was caught, balancing between personal integrity and the primitive need for connection, desperate for understanding. Then, as if fate's hand pressed harder, Sarah's health slipped unexpectedly. Panic surged through Jake like ice water. Instinct urged him to help, but fear gripped him tight, chaining him in indecision. Should he step forward, offering support, becoming a pillar in her time of need despite judgment? In that still moment, suspended between fear and yearning, Jake's heart wrestled with the decision that could alter everything. Would stepping into Sarah's life forge a bond amidst the wreckage of both their worlds, or merely complicate his already precarious existence? A weighty silence loomed, nurturing doubts that smoldered in the corners of his thoughts, waiting in darkness to flourish. Jake's mind flickered with images of Lily's smiling face, a reminder of the love he had been striving to uphold. The juxtaposition of tender moments with his daughter and the growing connection with Sarah felt like a torrent of conflicting emotions. It gnawed at him that he had begun to anticipate her messages, each ping of a notification drawing forth an odd spark of warmth in the icy abyss of his solitude. Yet with that warmth crept apprehension. What if reaching out to Sarah meant opening a chapter of disappointment or vulnerability he wasn't ready to face? He had built his defenses high after losing his wife, and though the emptiness had proven unbearable, it was a known void. A sudden shift, an invitation to invest emotionally in someone else's struggles, felt insurmountable. A heavy sigh escaped him as he placed the wrench down, surrendering to the storm inside him. It was no longer merely about parental duties. The battle had morphed into one of identity. Who was Jake, the widowed father, without the chains of grief? In moments of quiet, he longed to unearth a sense of self free from sorrow, to embrace joy and shared laughter again. He clenched his fists, grappling with the idea of being more than a caretaker to Lily. Today, he had time for introspection. What if he channeled his energy into helping Sarah? Contributing to someone else's recovery may be the catalyst that nudged him from the sidelines of life. He rose from his stool and paced the garage, the light flickering against the shadows cast by metal tools. Each step ignited a flickering hope buried deep within him. He recalled the moment when he had first responded to Sarah's request, the way her vulnerability drew him in, sparking something alive in him that had long been extinguished. It could be a path toward healing, not only for Sarah, but for himself. Jake's heart raced as he pulled out his phone. Maybe he could offer to help with errands, or even lend some financial assistance for groceries or school supplies. In that moment, it felt as if they were united by shared experiences rather than categorized by their circumstances. He flipped through their recent conversations, warmed by the humor they had exchanged even amidst the trepidation. Her resilience shone through, a beacon illuminating the shared isolation they battled. As he began typing, a wave of uncertainty crashed over him. Was he strong enough to step beyond the barriers he had built? Would it be perceived as charity or something deeper? He reminded himself that kindness refined his character, despite the judgment of those lurking outside their stories. With a deep breath, he hit send, opting for vulnerability over silence. The awaited moment for her reply felt like an eternity, a new layer of existence unfolding that would either validate his decision or render him exposed. Then, as the silence prevailed, doubt seeped in like an unwelcome fog. Did he misread the situation? Was he just a temporary reprieve in her chaotic life? But he fought against despair, driven by the need for connection and the chance to reawaken those dormant parts of himself. The message pinged. His pulse raced as the screen lit up with Sarah's name. But as the words began to form, Jake felt a shift in the atmosphere, a crack in his resolve and a flicker of possibility. He had decisively taken the step, yet the depth of its implications began to swirl around him. Would his willingness to embrace change cultivate a bond that could withstand the scrutiny of their circumstances? Or would it send them spiraling into an uncertainty neither could afford? The tenuous balance of hope and fear hung suspended, the clarity of choices still as murky as the shadows in the garage. Jake stared at his phone, the screen lighting up the shadows of the garage with a stark brilliance. Sarah's response flickered on the display, but it wasn't just the words that captivated him, it was the weight of their potential. He hesitated, heart racing anew with dread and anticipation. Could she recognize his struggle? Could he face hers? He took a deep breath, driven by an instinct perhaps stronger than the fear of vulnerability. The reply chirped again, and he forced himself to read it. Her words were grateful, yet laced with a hint of hesitation, an acknowledgement of their shared burdens. "Thank you, Jake. I could really use some help. It's been tough." An unexpected emotion surged, overwhelming his defenses. The complexities of their situations seemed to intertwine, rooting them deeper in the reality of their lives. Helping her in some small way felt like reaching back into an open wound. Yet he was also reminded of the flickering hope he glimpsed moments ago. Could this be an opportunity for him to step outside his isolation? Jake replied quickly, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he summoned the courage to be honest. "I'm here for you. What do you need? Let's work through it together." There was a certain liberating quality to those words, an assertion of solidarity that hinted at connection. He felt something shift, a sense of purpose hold alongside the resonant familiarity of isolation. Jake spent the next several minutes thinking about the kind of support Sarah might need. He considered her children's faces, their everyday challenges, and the little things that likely weighed her down. Maybe he could pick up groceries or take the kids to school on busy mornings. Yet, beneath the surface optimism lurked another wave of self-doubt. Was he more than just a temporary helper? As the minutes passed, he could practically feel the clock ticking down the time before he had to make a choice even bigger than ordering groceries. Should he step into her life completely? The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced along the walls of the garage. Jake moved back to the old workbench, its surface cluttered but oddly comforting. Each tool had its purpose, much like the roles he had played throughout life: father, husband, employee, friend. But where did he fit into Sarah's chaotic world? Was he equipped to handle the weight of another person's issues, or would it crush him under its mass? Wrestling with these thoughts, he began tidying up the workspace, using the physical task as a distraction. However, every minute was another reminder that to reconnect with life, he had to confront the reality of relationships, the messiness, the risk, the potential for heartbreak. He wasn't just taking on errands. He was opening himself up to the unpredictable tide of someone else's existence. A notification caught his attention. Sarah had replied with a list, simple yet genuine, and he felt a warmth rise in him. This was more than a transaction. This was a collaboration, a moment to create trust from vulnerability. Doubt lingered like a specter, whispering cruel questions, but Jake silenced it with the acknowledgement that this step could mean revealing his own scars alongside hers. In this connection, amid the clutter of feelings, he sensed the possibility of growth, not just for Sarah, but also for himself as a person trying to redefine his world. Resolved, he typed back, "I can do that. Just let me know when." Then he paused, reflecting deeply on the opportunity he had just leaned into. As he hit send, a weight lifted from his shoulders. His path forward was no longer just about healing from the past, but about actively crafting a new narrative driven by connection. But as he placed the phone down with a faint smile, air thick with hope, a nagging voice broke through. Was he ready for what came next? The initial exchanges were easy, but the true test lay ahead, confronting his own ghosts while helping to carry someone else's burden. And that's when it dawned on him. It wasn't just about offering support. It was also about confronting the undeniable vulnerability tangled in their intertwined lives. The moment of truth was approaching. He would have to navigate through shared pain and emerge transformed, or, perhaps, lose himself altogether. The next day, Jake woke with a sense of purpose that cut through the previous fog of self-doubt. He glanced at his phone. The nothingness of the previous evening now filled with a quiet anticipation. Each time it chimed, his heart raced, drawing him into the potential of connection he had scarcely allowed himself to envision. He made a mental list of the tasks Sarah had shared: groceries, picking up the kids from school, maybe even a few simple meals prepared ahead of time. The things he could do felt small but tangible, a ground-level path he hoped would lead somewhere meaningful. Yet the shadow of his feelings loomed larger than before. What if his presence only reminded her of her struggles? The thought gnawed at the edges of his newfound hope. Once more, he shuffled into the garage, wiping the sleep from his eyes and plunging into the clutter. The act of organizing felt empowering, as though he was rearranging the chaos in his mind, too. As he stacked tools and tossed out refuse, he likened himself to the workbench, tired, weathered, but full of potential waiting to be unlocked. The rhythm of his movements lent him clarity. He decided to approach supplies methodically: pen, paper, and a plan. First, groceries. He jotted down some items he was confident Sarah needed, then a few extras just in case. Flavors that reminded him of home, a nod to family meals that once filled a house with laughter and warmth. Could he recreate that atmosphere, even if just in brief moments to shine through Sarah's challenges? Midway through jotting down ideas, his phone buzzed again. Hesitating, he pulled it closer, half expecting Sarah's fatigue-laden tone. Instead, her message shone with a hint of vulnerability, a question woven through it. "Could you come by tomorrow? The kids would love to see you. I could really use an adult conversation." A surge of excitement coursed through him, followed by a fleeting wave of panic. Adult conversation? Jake prided himself on being able to manage difficult conversations with grace, but this felt different. Hesitation clutched at his gut. What if he didn't know how to navigate this new territory? He could dissolve into small talk, drift into jokes, but could he really allow himself to be vulnerable in return? He typed a quick reply. "Of course, I'd love to." The moment the words left his fingertips, he felt the weight of both eagerness and trepidation spike within him. The prospect of stepping into her life carried layers of complexity he hadn't fully grasped yet. Wounds he had soothed for himself time and again were now gathering the light of exposure in this new context. As evening drifted in, Jake set about preparing a meal. Cooking was a familiar comfort zone. Chopping, stirring, seasoning. Each action grounded him in the present, pulling his mind away from anxiety and letting emerging possibilities fill the space. With each swirling pot and sizzling pan, he cautiously entertained thoughts of Sarah laughing with her kids, connecting over shared meals, the warmth of informal gatherings. But beneath this soothing rhythm lingered doubts. Was providing food enough? Would it change anything in Sarah's world? If he stepped in now, wouldn't it be too easy to lose sight of himself in the process? Was this gesture an attempt to heal his own neck-deep wounds through her circumstances? For every bout of eagerness came the gnawing realization that such acts might create unforeseen emotional entanglements. The murmur of self-doubt echoed once more. He had stepped outside of his lifeline, one act of kindness now becoming a foray into uncharted territory. The simmering pots seemed to pause mid-boil, waiting for him to make the next move. Jake stood there, spoon in hand, staring into the rolling steam. This was more than an act of generosity. It was a commitment to a burgeoning connection that could tether him to Sarah, a leap into unfathomable depths. He took a deep breath, letting the steam swirl about him, mingling with the thoughts of what lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring him face to face with the crux of his fears, genuine connection intertwined with vulnerability while confronting his own past. Could he embrace the authenticity waiting just beyond the threshold? Jake had no answers, just a yearning for growth. But for now, the next day loomed larger than life, introspection colliding with reality and challenging everything he thought he knew. And he realized it was time to embrace tomorrow's uncertainties, or risk remaining perpetually on the sidelines. As morning broke, Jake could barely contain the whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety swirling within him. He dressed deliberately, each item meticulously selected, not just for style, but as a reflection of the man he was learning to be. With every button fastened, he envisioned presenting a diligent and trustworthy version of himself to Sarah and her children. He stepped into the light of the day, imbued with a sense of renewed determination. The morning air was crisp, invigorating. As he drove toward Sarah's house, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. Why hadn't he reached out sooner? He felt a kinship with static electricity, both charged with potential and yet vulnerable to unexpected discharges of emotion. The rhythm of the road underneath his tires echoed his striving heart. He grasped the steering wheel, intent on channeling his energy towards something constructive, a commitment deeper than mere companionship. As he pulled into her driveway, Jake's heart raced. For the first time in years, the prospect of another person's opinion weighed heavily on him. He had spent so long ensuring his thoughts and feelings remained cloistered, but now, in Sarah's fragile world, each word exchanged could reverberate with significance. He took a moment to breathe, centering himself. This was not merely about being there. It meant engaging, being open. Knocking on the door, he felt the moment stretch indefinitely. The world around him faded as his mind surged back to old fears. What if she couldn't see the effort? What if all she saw was the remnant of his past? The door swung open, and her surprise was palpable, instantly replaced by a familiar warmth. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice tinged with the shadow of exhaustion but glimmering with hope. "I appreciate you coming by." Sarah stepped aside, ushering him into the living room, an animated, chaotic blend of children's toys and the scent of brewed coffee rising to greet him. The cacophony of children's laughter, echoing from another room, caused a flicker of nostalgia in his chest. He hadn't tasted that kind of joy in far too long. "Wow, it smells amazing in here," he said, vaguely reviewing the makeshift chaos, as if it mirrored his own scattered thoughts. "And you're just in time for breakfast," she replied, a hint of strain in her voice battling against her willingness to engage. He settled in, exchanging pleasantries with her two children, who were buzzing around him, their energy infectious. As they devoured their breakfast, Jake felt himself loosening. Sarah watched him, a soft smile curling her lips, and slowly the foundation of conversation began to build, slowly creating a bridge between the past he longed to leave behind and the possibility of a new beginning. Yet, lurking beneath the visible tranquility, thoughts gnawed at him. He observed Sarah's subtle weariness, and with every cheerful laugh from her children, that disquiet tightened in his gut. Was he simply a temporary distraction from her storm? Would his presence, no matter how bright, inevitably fade? The stakes felt staggeringly high, and the self-imposed pressure began to creep in once more. Taking the plunge, he leaned closer to her as they cleared the table. "Sarah," he started, hesitating for just a fraction, "thank you for inviting me. It means a lot to me." It felt like a moment to be authentic, to step beyond small talk. Her eyes lifted, curiosity kindled within their depths. "It's nice to have adult company. Honestly, I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately, just trying not to sink." His heart clenched. "You know, it's okay to feel that way." Jake's voice emerged steadier than he felt. "We can't always be strong." Maybe it was a test, his ability to be present, to understand while remaining anchored in his own form of vulnerability. He realized, as the words rolled off his tongue, that growth could stem from synergy rather than isolation. Could this be the roots, forging a bond deeper than mere kindness? A flicker of doubt surfaced again as their connection slowly began to deepen, fear that the bridge would dissolve into treacherous waters if he ventured too far, too fast. Just as her eyes lingered on him, capturing unguarded moments, he couldn't help but wonder, what reality was he stepping into? As their conversation drifted toward personal anecdotes and shared life lessons, the air charged with unspoken possibilities. Jake felt himself teetering on the edge of a daunting emotional plunge. He was torn between the safety of superficiality and the tantalizing abyss of intimacy. Could he navigate these waters? Amidst the warmth, a nagging thought intruded. The time had come to embrace authenticity or retreat behind the walls he had fortified for years. The stakes of each spoken word lingered, poised like meeting a ghost, a former reflection of who had once dwelt within him. And then, as Sarah began to share a glimpse into the struggles that lingered, a knock at the door broke the spell. Jake's pulse quickened. Who could it be? What new complexity might intrude on the fragile dynamics he had begun to step into? The knock reverberated through the room, sharp and unwelcome, pulling Jake back into the present. His heart raced with uncertainty as Sarah's expression shifted to one of concern. She glanced toward the door, contemplating the interruption that might disrupt the fragile intimacy they had been crafting. "Maybe it's just a neighbor," she suggested softly, though her voice had a trace of apprehension. Jake could sense the tension coiling within her, a stark reminder of how precarious her balance was. As she walked away to open the door, Jake felt an unsettling anticipation stirring in him. This was the moment that could challenge everything he hoped to build. When the door swung open, Jake's stomach twisted at what he saw. A man stood there, a figure firmly rooted in the past Sarah had tried to overcome. There was an underlying familiarity about him, igniting a spark of insecurity in Jake. He could tell immediately that he was not just a casual acquaintance. This was someone more significant. The man, with a rugged demeanor and a sharp look, registered surprise as he laid eyes on Sarah. "Hey, I wasn't expecting you to be home." His tone was laden with an unspoken familiarity mixed with regret. Jake could feel himself withdrawing further into the background, the glimmer of connection he'd felt with Sarah now fleeting, like smoke dissipating in the air. As concern etched itself deeper into her features, Jake's mind raced. Was this man a remnant of her difficult past? Did their history hold the power to overshadow the promise of a new beginning? "Jake, this is—" Sarah hesitated, her words hanging in the air as if made heavier by the weight of their history. "My ex, Tom." Tom's gaze flicked toward Jake, a flicker of thinly veiled judgment passing between them. The required polite handshake felt like sandpaper against Jake's skin. "So, you're the new friend," Tom noted, his command over the words alerting Jake to the territorial nature hanging in the air. "Yes, I'm Jake," he replied, battling against the instinct to retreat. Each syllable felt loaded with implications, confession, acceptance, and contention. The resolve he had built in Sarah's kitchen began to fracture. Could he confront the shadows lingering from her past and stand firm in his commitment to her now? "Can we talk, Sarah?" Tom's voice was insistent, a brazen challenge, and Jake felt a surge of adrenaline kick in. The woman he was trying to connect with now found herself at the crossroads of old wounds and new possibilities. "Right now, the kids are—" She looked back toward the living room, where laughter still sparkled, deceptively innocent. "They won't mind. I just need a few minutes," Tom pressed, impatience seeping into his tone. The undercurrent in his voice threatened to reveal layers of their previous relationship. It was a history that hovered just behind Sarah's stoic exterior. Jake watched, feeling a storm of emotions wash over him: confusion, anger, insecurity. He was on the precipice of a decision: to assert himself, to remain supportive, or to slip into the shadows and allow Sarah to navigate her own conflict. He wrestled with conflicting desires, to protect her as much as himself. "Maybe we should just talk later," Sarah suggested, but Jake could see her hesitation. The weight of unasked questions, the unresolved threads threatening to come undone, tangled between them. "No, let's do this now," Tom said with a startling sense of resolution. "It's time to clear the air." The silence that felt suffocating, laced with missed opportunities and lingering doubts. Jake's heart thudded, each beat echoing the stakes of this moment. In that charged atmosphere, he recognized that the fragile connection he had begun to forge with Sarah hinged on her ability to confront past hurt. Would stepping up galvanize her, or would it send her spiraling back into an emotionally fortified shell? Jake shifted in his seat, reluctant but resolved. "If this involves Sarah, I think I have a right to be here," he said, surprising even himself with the steadiness of his voice. This was it, the moment of truth, an opportunity to confront the specter of the past, where authentic presence could either solidify their bond or drive a wedge between them. In that instant, he realized he had to invite growth for them both, regardless of the jagged terrain of truth they were about to traverse. As all eyes turned to him, Jake felt the weight of the moment burgeoning with significance. His own journey of self-discovery stood precariously at the edge, and now how he navigated this confrontation would dictate the foundation of his future. A deeper question loomed. Was he ready to face not just the unexpected intrusions of Sarah's past, but his own fears, anxieties, and the potential for heartbreak? With resolve mingling with apprehension, he awaited Sarah's response. The air hung heavy with tension, an invisible thread connecting the three of them as silence persisted. Jake could feel every heartbeat drumming louder in his ears, amplifying the stakes that had been set before him. Sarah's gaze darted between him and Tom, a tumultuous sea of emotions reflecting back at him. She needed to navigate this moment, but it felt, increasingly, like he was bound to it as well. Tom stepped forward, pushing for his agenda, clearly impatient. "Sarah, we both know we can't keep avoiding this. It's time we talk about the kids, about everything." His voice was seasoned with authority, as though he believed he could dictate the terms of their conversation, a stance Jake found infuriating. Jake squared his shoulders, unwilling to let the moment slip. "Look, Tom," he interjected, gradually dissecting his own uncertainty with each word. "If this involves Sarah and her children, I deserve to be here. We all deserve a clear dialogue." Tom's eyes narrowed, assessing Jake not just as a rival, but as an obstacle. However, the fleeting glance of recognition Jake saw flicker in Sarah's eyes sparked a flicker of hope within him. This was his chance, not just to assert his role in her life, but to commit to his own growth, taking control of this chaotic moment. "I get that you both have history," Jake continued, his voice steadying. "But Sarah is not your past anymore. She's someone striving to move forward, and I want to support that journey. This isn't just about old wounds, it's about healing and what comes next." The declaration came from a place of reflection. Weeks of nurturing a potential relationship had taught him about vulnerability. He recalled the countless nights spent contemplating his own values as a father and partner. Now, he faced Tom's challenge headlong, deciding he wouldn't run away from uncomfortable truths. A silence unfolded, thick with the weight of Jake's words, the reality settling around them. He could see how torn Sarah was, filled with doubt, yet desperate to embrace a better future. It was an impression that moved through him like a tide. The pull to anchor himself in her life contrasted with the urge to flee and let her face this alone. "Jake," Sarah began, her voice soft but shaky. "Let me finish," Jake interrupted gently but firmly. He pressed on, feeling the momentum of his growing confidence. "You need to confront this person standing here, but you also need to consider what you want for yourself and your children. I know enough to see how strong you are, even when you don't. You have the right to decide what kind of relationship you want, past, present, and future." Tom shifted, the glimmer of surprise registering on his face. This wasn't the dynamic he had expected. There was an undeniable shift in the air, as though Jake had laid bare a truth that everyone could finally acknowledge. Old narratives didn't have to dictate the future. For a brief moment, Jake glimpsed Sarah's eyes filling with something between gratitude and fear, a mixture that spoke of vulnerability not yet fully explored. Then, suddenly, the children's laughter echoed in the next room, a stark reminder of their innocence and the choices that rippled through their family. "Let's go into the living room, away from the children," Sarah finally said, her voice stronger now, and Jake felt a surge of approval. She was taking control. "Just give me a second," Tom replied, his facade of cool unraveling a bit under pressure. This was a small victory for both Sarah and Jake. As they stepped into the living room, Jake realized that every moment of asserting himself, every discomfort, had contributed to a newfound understanding of what resilience meant for him. He wasn't merely fighting for Sarah, he was forging a path for himself, wrestling with his insecurities rather than avoiding them. But deep within, a new question began to surface, one that made the air in the room feel even heavier. If Sarah truly confronted Tom and everything fell apart, where did that leave Jake? Was he prepared to hold space for her in the aftermath, regardless of the outcome? As Jake glanced at Sarah, ready for whatever lay ahead, he sensed the inevitable storm brewing. The truth they were about to confront could shatter illusions or lay down a foundation for real connection. Did he have the strength to be there for Sarah no matter what, knowing how much was at stake? He wasn't sure. But as the moment loomed, he felt himself leaning into courage, ready once more to redefine his place in this tangled competition of past and present. The living room was dimly lit, shadows clinging to the walls, as if echoing the tension among them. Jake observed Sarah take a deep breath, her posture shifting with newfound resolution. It was evident that this confrontation was monumental for her, a turning point that could redefine her future. For all of her hesitation, there was an ember of determination flickering in her eyes. "Tom," Sarah began, her voice imbued with strength, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about where we stand, for the children's sake and for ours." Jake felt a swell of admiration for her courage. This was not just a personal endeavor, it was an act of reclamation, a public acknowledgement that her life was no longer solely entwined with Tom's. Still, beneath that admiration lingered a hint of apprehension. He understood the depths of the emotions involved, a necessary excavation of truths from their shared past that could reshape everything. Tom's cool demeanor faltered momentarily. Jake noted the tightening of his jaw, the slight reddening of his face. This was the moment of truth, one they had all sidestepped until now. Jake positioned himself as a quiet pillar of support behind Sarah, prepared to interject if Tom wandered into familiar aggressive territory. The silence that followed hung heavily, creating an unbearable weight, as all three of them grappled with the unraveling of their respective perceptions. "You think this is just about the past?" Tom snapped, his voice laced with resentment. "I have every right to want to be in my children's lives without interference. Who you bringing into the picture?" Jake's instincts flared at Tom's dismissive tone, ready to step in, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had come too far. He needed to focus not just on defending Sarah, but on articulating his own place within this delicate triangle. "Let's clarify something," Jake interjected, his voice steady and resolute. "What happens moving forward concerns the kids, and it requires collaboration, not competition. You can't impose your past mistakes, Sarah, nor can you dictate who she chooses to involve in her life." Each syllable was a deliberate choice, a defiance against the old patterns they were all used to. Sarah turned to Jake, her gratitude palpable. It was a simple gesture, yet it solidified a pivotal connection. She turned back to Tom, her expression firm. "I want what's best for our kids, Tom. They deserve a stable and harmonious environment. Which means we need to lay all of this on the table once and for all." Jake recognized the shift. Sarah was no longer just reacting to Tom's demands. She was actively crafting her narrative. This was where his role could blossom, not just as a romantic interest, but as a potential ally for her transformation. "Children need to see us adapt and evolve," Jake continued, leaning forward slightly, drawing energy from Sarah's determination. "They deserve actions, not just words. They will notice the tension, which can impact how they see relationships growing up. This isn't just about the adults, it's about their future." Tom's eyes narrowed, caught off guard for a moment. His defenses momentarily cracked open as he searched for a retort. "You're new to this. You don't know the situation like I do," he countered. But the sting behind his words lacked conviction. It was a small victory for Jake. He could sense the momentum shifting, revealing that Tom was struggling to assert his position against a unified front. This conflict was not just an arena for them. It was an opportunity for Jake to refine himself, press against the walls of discomfort, and redefine who he wanted to be in both their lives. "True, I'm not in your history," Jake replied, a hint of challenge in his voice. "But maybe that's precisely the point. I can bring a fresh perspective that might just offer another path." For the first time, Jake saw a glitch in Tom's bravado. The uncertainty now flickered behind his eyes, an internal battle brewing as he confronted the possible loss of control. Sarah's gaze softened as she surveyed the turmoil unfolding. The resolve that had characterized her posture seemed to soften into something akin to hope. They were all learning in this moment, unearthing hidden landscapes of possibility. Yet doubts snagged at Jake. If they emerged from this confrontation with all parties ready to change, would he ever truly be enough to fill the void for both Sarah and her children? Or would the past prevail, leaving him stranded in uncertain waters? The tension thickened as the countdown began. Could he stand on the precipice of new beginnings, or would they plummet back into the chaos of their tangled histories? "Let's not rush this," Sarah finally said, her voice calm even as it broke the charged air. "We need to unpack everything together." Jake felt the chill of gravity draw them downward again. This was the moment where everything could shift, one way or another. Would the future they were attempting to construct be built on solid ground, or would the unpredictable past command their narrative once more? As the air thickened with unsaid words, Jake braced for what lay ahead, the urgency of the moment electrifying his resolve. The most challenging conversations had yet to be addressed, and the stakes had never felt higher. Would they emerge stronger, or would pieces of them break apart irrevocably? "Are you ready to face the real issues?" Jake thought to himself, anxiety creeping in at the edges. As antennas of doubts extended, a disquiet settled over him. The answer hung in the balance, and time was slipping away. The moment hung in the air, fraught with unresolved tension. Sarah's admission lingered, creating an unspoken command for change. Jake observed as Tom's expression transitioned from disbelief to anger, presenting the evident need for confrontation. This was not just a negotiation about the kids, it was an opportunity for everyone involved to reclaim agency. "Unpack everything?" Tom echoed, the sarcasm dripping from his voice. "You think we can just sit down and play nice after everything that's happened?" The challenge was clear, but so was Jake's determination. Jake stood firm, ready to confront Tom's dismissiveness. "This isn't about playing nice. It's about honesty. We all need to own our part in this, even the painful truths." The quiver in Jake's own voice surprised him, yet it also underscored a transformative moment. He was not merely an onlooker, but an active participant in shaping the future narrative of their interwoven lives. Tom opened his mouth to retort, but something in Jake's conviction caught him off guard, making him hesitate. In that brief pause, Jake sensed a shift in the atmosphere, as if the universe was allowing them a fleeting glimpse of what might redefine their relationships. Sarah's quiet strength was resonating like a beacon, urging him on. "Look, we've all made mistakes," Sarah interjected, her voice calm yet unwavering. "But that doesn't mean we can't work together for our children. It's time to stop letting the past dictate our present." Jake sensed a ripple of realization in her words. This confrontation was not merely settling the past, it was a strategic strategy to carve out a more stable future. Her growth inspired him. Sarah had found her voice, and Jake realized his role was to amplify that voice, not as a defender, but as a partner navigating uncharted waters with her. But doubt again nudged at Jake's thoughts. If he struggled to find his footing, could he navigate these tumultuous waters effectively? He constantly revisited the question of his worth in this equation. What if his presence in Sarah's life complicated rather than clarified their situation? The fear of inadequacy loomed large, sending jolts of apprehension through him. Tom's defensiveness was retreating before him. "We can't just ignore what happened," he replied, more softly, though still firm. "You were my wife. We have history, mistakes, kids involved. I'm not ready to just forget that." "Neither am I," quickly affirmed, her gaze sharpening. "But we can't let that history keep us bound. They deserve better than watching us battle. They deserve to see that we can adapt." With every exchange, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't merely an outsider looking in. He was part of the dynamic, an integral component of this transformation that was brewing. His commitment to support Sarah, to stand alongside her in reclaiming her life, began to shift his perspective. No longer did he see Tom as the enemy. He began to view him as a catalyst for their evolution. Let's create boundaries that honor the past but don't let it define the future, Jake proposed, his heart racing as he articulated the growing notion in his mind. You both need to reassess how you communicate so that it contributes meaningfully to the kids' lives. I'm willing to step back if it means you both can find common ground. The uncharted territory felt precarious, yet promising. Jake's internal dialogue began morphing, reflecting a realization. He did not merely want to find a place in Sarah's life, he wanted to be part of a collective forward movement. And yet, the anxiety lingered like an unwelcome guest at the door. Tom that met his gaze. It was a look filled not only with conflict, but also with the realization that perhaps Jake was proposing a way forward that didn't erase his past, but rather evolved from it, something Tom had never considered. "This is going to be rough," Tom finally said, the tension still palpable in his voice, but less confrontational now. "Are you really ready to commit to that?" Jake took a deep breath, remembering how far he'd come, and how far they all had yet to go. "If it means providing a better life for the kids, I'm all in. But we all need to understand that growth demands vulnerability." As silence replaced the words exchanged, Jake recognized the path unfolding beneath them. A moment of collective vulnerability that could forge new connections rather than disconnects. The stakes felt impossibly high. If this experiment in cooperation faltered, would they all fall back into their old roles? He steadied himself for Sarah's response, aware that they stood on the precipice of reconciliation and risk. What revelations awaited them in the depths of this confrontation? The uncharted waters ahead loomed darker than he'd envisioned. "Are you ready to redefine everything?" Jake wondered, uncertain whether the shared future would be filled with harmony or chaos. The question lingered on the air, taut with the possibilities of their next steps. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity, filled with weighty implications and unspoken truths. Jake took a moment to assess the atmosphere, realizing that in stepping forward, he had inadvertently shifted the dynamics of their fragile triangle. It was no longer just about Sarah and Tom's history. The narrative was being written anew, with each of them sharing responsibilities for the direction it was heading. "Growth demands vulnerability," he echoed softly, newly aware of the layers entwined in their conversation, an essential truth brimming with courage and risk. Sarah's eyes met his, revealing a glimmer of gratitude, a connection forged through their collective struggle. Sarah took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. "We can either keep repeating our old patterns, or we can choose to forge a new path for our kids." Her voice shook slightly, a testament to the gravity of the moment. "I want to choose the latter." Jake felt each word resonate deeply within him, serving as a poignant reminder of his own journey. He had fought to lift himself from the wreckage of loss and isolation, and now he was standing beside another brave soul ready to define their existence. "I'm here to support that choice," Jake asserted, unyielding determination coursing through him. "Let's break down the expectations tethering us to the past. If we truly want to prioritize the kids, we need to redefine how we interact with each other." Tom's posture shifted, and for the first time, Jake noticed a hint of vulnerability. With guarded skepticism, he turned to Jake, weighing the sincerity of his words. "Are you sure? Because this isn't going to be easy. It requires a lot of work and willingness." "I wouldn't be here if I didn't see the potential," Jake replied, the clarity in his voice casual yet resolute. "We have to confront the discomfort of change if we want to create an environment conducive to our children's growth." As Tom processed this, Jake felt a subtle shift in the air. Their discussion had moved beyond hostility and retreading of old grievances, entering a space of possibilities. The past no longer loomed so ominously. It was instead a resource for learning rather than a prison. "I think we all maybe need to sit down and map out some ground rules, starting with clear communication and boundaries," Sarah commented firmly. "The kids deserve to see us collaborate rather than fight." Jake marveled at the shift transcending the room, his heartbeat steadying as he regarded Sarah. Her conviction laid the groundwork for all of them, creating fertile soil for potential growth. The conversation moved into practical territory, where new patterns began to take shape. Jake, along with Sarah and Tom, dissected the ways in which they would need to operate together. They spoke candidly about their responsibilities and aspirations, not just for themselves, but primarily for the children who were unwitting victims of their fractured pasts. Jake offered ideas, framing actionable solutions and straightforward dialogue. He watched as Sarah regained assertiveness, pushing Tom to consider her perspective while also validating his own. Each exchange of words painted the canvas of a cooperative future they were beginning to construct. In that immediate moment, Jake truly understood that supporting Sarah meant transforming himself in tandem. He witnessed her confidence deepen, realizing that perhaps his presence was no longer simply a danger to her healing. The very act of committing to her journey was his affirmative step toward personal redemption. The discussions morphed from tense exchanges into collaborative brainstorming sessions. They outlined shared responsibilities, including demonstrating respect for one another's boundaries and recognizing the emotional complexities intertwined in parenting. Hours flew by, a battleground of emotions resigned to the preciousness of their children's well-being. As they wrapped up their first series of engagements, Jake felt an unexpected sense of triumph. They hadn't simply survived the discomfort, they had begun to thrive in it. A warm smile crept across Sarah's face as she caught Jake's eye. It was a look that spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had just embarked upon. "Thank you for your support," she murmured, sincerity enveloping her words. "I couldn't have navigated this alone." Jake felt a swell of pride buoy him from the inside out. He had transcended doubt, migrated from the realm of fear into one of engagement, and opened himself up to rediscovery. He understood that strength could emerge not just from overcoming adversity, but from embracing connection and authenticity in the face of uncertainty. As he left the house later that evening, warmth suffused him, a blend of accomplishment, satisfaction, and hope. He reveled in the knowledge that he had not only supported Sarah, but had initiated a transformative dialogue. He had stepped outside the walls he had built, confronting his fears to forge real relationships. Jake drove home, the orange glow of the sunset spilling across the horizon, reflecting the evolution from despair to purpose. At that moment, he comprehended both his potential and the inherent beauty of being vulnerable. A lesson that would stretch beyond this singular experience and lay the foundation for future triumphs awaiting to be realized. His phone buzzed with an incoming message from Sarah. Another small milestone in this journey, a reminder of the connection forged. As he read her words, he felt gratitude wash over him, a deep knowing that he had indeed conquered uncertainty, emerging stronger and more self-aware. Because of the bridges built today, Jake understood he was ready to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, not just for himself, but for the beautiful new family he was beginning to envision. This was not only personal fulfillment, this was a life transformed, making it possible for him to embrace not just one story of love, but the countless iterations that awaited him. And for the first time in a long while, as he pulled into his driveway, he recognized a profound truth. He was more than a single father. He was a man engaged in life, with the capacity to love openly and heal with purpose. The moment had arrived. The tide of transformation had swept in, marking the end of the storm and the beginning of something magnificent. If you resonate with tales of personal transformation and conquering life's hurdles, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to fuel our algorithm and keep our community thriving. We want to hear from you. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this enlightening conclusion.